Welcome to the Workology podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger of bloggingforjobs.com, for an in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, welcome your host, Jessica, with this podcast episode of Workology.
Things are really beginning to heat up as we head into the fall budget season, conference and marketing season. Along with this extremely busy travel, conference, and sales acquisition season comes HR technology and service companies looking to leverage HR influencers and thought leaders to increase their sales, marketing, and reach. This is certainly on my mind as I'm looking at my HR tech calendar for dinner and meeting invites. And I'm already seeing those invites hitting my inbox. Today, I am joined by Mark Williman. He's the founder and CEO of HR Marketer. HR Marketer is a marketing automation and research software that does many things, including understanding trends and what influencers and thought leaders in the industry are doing, what they're saying, and also what kind of topics are trending in the industry. Mark, welcome to the Workology podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here.
So let's get down to influencers. I just feel like it's an important topic for us to think about as we're heading into this season, just because Twitter's going to get chatty, the blog space, the webinar space. A lot of marketers out there or new companies that are coming in and maybe bringing in a company like yours or others are suddenly maybe thinking about social media influencers or influencer space. So let's talk first about HR thought leaders or influencers. What makes a thought leader?
Okay, somebody with something interesting to say. I'm not even, sure how to answer that. There's a crossover between influencers and thought leaders, Jessica. I don't think all thought leaders are influencers, and I don't think all influencers are thought leaders. But when you ask me what a thought leader is, without naming names in this space, it's people whose opinion I respect. They have great insights into what's going on in the industry. They can consult with you about your business. They're just extremely talented and experienced and very knowledgeable people in our space. Influencers, Jessica, may not have those skill sets, but they can get you a lot of visibility.
It's interesting. I did a podcast at episode 24 with a woman out of Silicon Valley. Her name is Denise Brousseau, and she has a book and does coaching with individuals normally at large corporations and talks about how to become and how to be a thought leader. It was an interesting podcast, and she has a whole method to her madness. It's not necessarily about, being an influencer for, I think, a lot of companies, but
do you think that anybody can be taught to become a thought leader?
No, I don't think that, but she did.
Yeah, no, I was curious. I mean, how that session went, because I would agree with you. I think everybody can improve their communication skills and how they approach, analyzing data and all that sort of stuff. But they're going to hit a ceiling. Not everybody is going to be able to make themselves into a sought-after thought leader.
It's a full-time job. I mean, it's a lot of work. But I like that you're making a distinction between thought leader versus influencer, because I do think that they're two different things, and I agree with how you're describing it, but we kind of lump them all together.
Cool. Well, that's a good way to start. We agree
absolutely. Yeah, it's not like an arguing podcast, right? Like we're not. It's a debate, just more a conversation. Well, let's talk about maybe expectations. So what type of expectations do you think companies should have when working with or engaging with the thought leader or an influencer? Maybe that they want to have them do, a webinar or some writing or some speaking. What is that? What does these expectations look like?
Yeah, that's a good question, because talking with a lot of the solution providers out there, I've heard very disgruntled marketing execs who have been frustrated with the influencers that they've been paying, and others who are thrilled. And what I see is it's really the job of the individual that's hiring the influencer to really understand why they're hiring the influencer. What are you trying to accomplish? Because that ultimately helps you pick the right influencer. There are some influencers that are great writers, and if you're hiring them to write a white paper or a blog post, great. And how you gonna evaluate that? Probably on how good the content is. There are others who are great speakers. They can host a panel at an event you're going to be at. They can speak on your webinar. And then there are others who are very strategic and kind of lean toward the thought leadership side. And if you're bringing them in on your advisory board or to help you work through a challenge you're having, that's going to be, again, a different influencer. And then lastly, there are influencers that bring a great audience in. And a lot of influencers, Jessica, and I would cite you as this. Not only can write, can speak, but if I'm hiring you to help get people to my webinar, you're probably gonna, if you're interested, you're probably gonna be able to pull that off because you have a huge network. So I think the long-winded answer to the question is to avoid unsatisfied relationships. It's understanding specifically why you're engaging with the thought leader or the influencer, and beforehand really have some key metrics that you're going to be looking at to determine whether or not it's successful, and make sure that the influencer or thought leadership is in agreement with you on what those metrics are. So that's how I would approach it, is because they're all different and they bring different skill sets to the table.
I think it's kind of interesting when people are engaging somebody like me or others out there. Sometimes the marketing leaders or our business leaders think that one blog post or one webinar or one tweet is going to drive this amazing business to them, and it normally doesn't work that way, like any marketing. I mean, it's not normally one action. It's many, many, many different activities and actions that lead to a sale or registration for a webinar or whatever your goal is.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
What are some trends or campaigns you're seeing that are working? I mean, you're not only are you working with HR marketer and you're like analyzing the space, but then you have you're part of another company that does a lot of PR and marketing too. So what things are working?
Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and it's great stories and great content are as critical today as they were, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. And we got into a habit, I think, with a lot of marketing automation tools are to blame when we got lazy with our content. We figured, oh, I've been reading that I should be blogging once a week. So then you pay somebody $20 a blog to just have two blog posts going out every week, and it's complete nonsense. It's garbage. It's not interesting, and it might be a short-term boost to some of your SEO and web traffic, but your abandonment rate is skyrocketing. It's not really working. So I think people are really coming around to understanding, painfully in some cases, because it's not inexpensive, that it really matters what you write and how you write it, and it's not always inexpensive. And the same thing in PR. It's really the stories that you tell. That's what great PR is. It's how you're going to make the stories interesting and engaging to the audience that you're pitching them to. But that's one big one, Jessica. I think it's the content. It matters.
I think people take that for granted. Like they think that you just whip this up, like 20 minutes, $20, whatever, and really great stories or content or strategies, whether it's marketing or using thought leaders, influencers to be part of that, it takes time and energy.
Yeah,
and a lot of thought. Well, let's take a little bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you're listening to the Workology podcast powered by Blogging for Jobs. Today, we're talking about how to engage HR influencers. This is for all you marketers out there or startup CEOs and founders. I just really want to provide some insights, and I have Mark Williman here, and you can follow Mark on Twitter at HR Marketer. So he's enlightening us all about influencers and trends that he's seeing. He's being a thought leader about thought leaders. You are. Well, so one of my biggest pet peeves, and this is a personal thing, is that when vendors or marketers, PR or service providers reach out to me, and I mentioned this earlier before the beginning of the podcast, like they don't do their research. And then I get sent also sometimes a mass email or some sort of cookie cutter message. And I keep getting emailed over and over again. Hey, did you respond to my email from 3 weeks ago? Follow-up email about follow-up email. What are some ways? I feel like these sort of activities, while it's a numbers game, could be effective. It is a time suck for me personally, and I know other influencers, thought leaders in this space feel the same way. What are some ways that companies can build relationships with influencers without sending 15 emails?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it continues to be a challenge for a lot of new brands, especially that are entering the space. Is the first thing they want to know is who all the influencers are, and to be honest, that's pretty much a commodity now. It's not that difficult. Don't ever buy software that just for the purpose of telling you who the influencers are. It's not that hard to figure out who they are, and it doesn't change that much month to month. And another mistake that companies make is just assuming that if you just start resharing a bunch of their content on social, that they're supposed to automatically give you a bunch of free stuff in return. And I tell brands, the influencers that you're going to want to work with that are actually going to be able to get you the visibility you need or provide you with the thought leadership you need are not free. And you really got to realize that right out of the gate, that nothing is free when it comes to this. So I think social, Jessica, is actually really a great, affordable way to at least make your brand visible with the influencer by sharing their content, retweeting it, favoring it, all that stuff. But don't expect anything or be disappointed if nothing happens. But at least it's a way to introduce your brand, your avatar, your photo, whatever it is, to the influencer. After that, like you said earlier when we've been speaking, it's do a little bit of research. It takes 10 minutes. Look at the person's LinkedIn profile, Google them, just learn a little bit about them. And lastly, and most importantly, when you do make contact with them, and I think some thought has to go into when it's the right time, make it personal. If it's an email, give them a reason why they should have a conversation with you, or give you some of their time. Have an objective in mind. Show them that you know who they are, and approach it like any business partnership you'd be pursuing. Make sure that it's not all about you. And I will add one more thing. Get out to some trade shows and some conferences, and that's the best way to introduce you to and to have a quick conversation with an influencer. But it goes back to where we started. Have goals in mind and why you want to hire or work with an influencer, and understand they're not free, and then just go about in a very respectful manner making contact as you would with any prospect or business partner.
Agreed. This industry is so much about relationships, right? So but I also have seen, as have you, being in the space for a long time, both of us, people come and go quite often. So sometimes, I'm excited, tech startup company that's, in a seed that wants to talk to me. But I also know, a handful of companies last year that are no longer with us this year. So I'm not always going to be so excited just to carve out 30 to 45 minutes to an hour of my time out of the day, keeping me away from revenue generating activities, to talk to you about your big idea.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother podcast is expectations of startups and what it takes to actually stick around. It's a lot of startups I meet at shows. It's they have these brilliant, and some of them there really is technology, and an influencer, a thought leader once told me that what a lot of founders who are engineers or technical people don't realize is that whatever you spent on bringing your software to market, they don't realize that it's about 10x or 5x that amount to actually market it. And I've made that mistake myself in the past, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Agreed. Well, I know that you like to talk about this topic. That's why I would hit you up to kind of discuss. You blog a lot about it, which I appreciate. I feel like the more conversations we have about these type of things, the more that we can help influence, our peers and friends and people in the industry about how they should engage the influencers. What are some of the most common questions that you get from companies or clients that are asking about influencer marketing?
Well, believe it or not, as I touched on earlier, a lot of people want to know who are the influencers. And, that's, I was joking earlier saying it's kind of a commodity. We all know of who the influencers are. But, there's another guy out there that I read a lot about. He's written a lot of books on the subject, and he always tells people that he defines an influencer as anybody with a public social profile, whether you have 40 people following you or 100,000, because they're influencing somebody. And so, but that's a big question I get, is who are the influencers? And there's the top 50, top 100, whatever it is. But that's not really how you should be looking at it. What you really should be looking at are what are your needs, and who out there might be able to meet those needs. But that's the most common question, Jessica, is who are the influencers from people that are new to the space?
And there's a million lists out there. There'll probably be a new one Monday that's going to give you a list of the most 25 influential HR and recruiting people by some vendor or service provider or blogger that is hoping that we'll all retweet the article.
Exactly. And that's why they're produced, and there's not much use for them.
Just wait till Monday, and then you can get your list. So let's talk a little bit about social media. So I feel like I'm on Snapchat, and I really like it because it's a private place. Like, I'm not broadcasting everything out on Twitter or Facebook. In fact, I have sort of taken a Facebook detox. This is finishing up my first week, and so more conversations are happening behind closed doors with these social networks like Snapchat and WhatsApp, and for me, like Facebook Messenger. And that makes it harder, I think, for companies to see the influence. Like on Twitter, we all retweet each other. We can see who has the most tweets at a conference. That's cool. But a lot of these things are kind of going behind closed doors. What suggestions do you have for companies so they can kind of track people's networks that you might not be able to see?
Well, that's a big question. I love social. My favorite channel, and it's in some ways not that social, but I love Twitter. Twitter is where I still find the best content, the best. If I look back at the best articles I've read, most of them I find through tweets. I'm not on it all day long, but it's still a very effective and efficient way of monitoring the conversations in the space and staying abreast of new events or of new people. And so I think that's important. It's also a great way, as other social networks are, to build your visibility. And in some ways, it's a pretty good way to do some lead prospecting. So it's really important, I feel, to be, especially in the HR space. I was just talking to a marketing exec at one of the vendors that came from another industry, and he was shocked at how many HR people, compared to other industries, are actually on social, and in particular on Twitter. So I use them all. I think they're important, even though some of those conversations are going behind closed doors or whatnot. That's expected, but it still doesn't mean you should just get off social. We've written extensively about just the importance, and even monitoring what your competitors are doing on social. It's just a great way to stay current what's going on.
So you really feel like, and like Twitter is a great example. Like, it can be really private or personal or specific. You and I can @message each other and talk on Twitter, and it feels just like if we were Skype chatting, right? But it is such a great place to broadcast and find resources or information or connect with different people that you wouldn't otherwise meet, maybe at a trade show or in your normal daily activities.
Yeah, I found a new CRM as a result of Twitter. I just got turned on to the software through Twitter, and it ended up saving me a ton of money. And I pay attention to people's bios. I look at who's following me. I'm picky with who I'm following. We don't follow people that are completely irrelevant to our space. But I like Twitter and Facebook has its own purpose. But I think you got to be careful in these social networks, Jessica, not to overuse them, right? I mean, if you just automate everything and say, I'm going to set up and not even going to look at the content I'm sharing. I'm going to let the software do it for me. And that's no. That's not the way to use social. And you're probably going to be disappointed with the results. I think it's important. It's okay to automate in the sense that you're scheduling stuff, but pick the stuff you're scheduling, write the messages or the tweet and pick the hashtags or do the @mentions of people yourself. Don't rely on software just to automatically insert all that stuff and send it out. I think that's what gives social a bad name on any channel, not just Twitter.
It's the customization, like the little touches, like adding the graphic or including the name of the author in that tweet when you're composing like a piece of content that you really like, or, just saying, hey, Mark, this is I found this article, thought you might be interested in it. I mean,
Exactly.
those are the little things that others, I think, like you're saying, aren't doing. And you can.
Yeah, and you don't have to. It's not a volume game. I read a great article this morning by a blogger in the space. And I really enjoyed it. It was short, 400 or 500 words, but it was good. And I shared it, and I mentioned the person's name and said it was a good article. But I sent that out. And some days I might tweet once, other days I might tweet 10 times, or maybe 50 if it's a trade show's going on. But I think have a personal touch to it. It's all about people at the end of the day. And if you just let the software automate everything for you and just walk away, that's what I guess I'm saying is don't do that, because then you're going to be disappointed. Because social does work, and it works very effectively at getting to know new people, staying abreast with what's going on, and even generating traffic to your content that you're sharing. But it just has to be done the right way and not turned over to some computer to do it all for you.
Well, you miss opportunities. Like a couple weeks ago, I tweeted that I was looking for a demo of a certain type of HR tech software, and somebody connected me to a company. So I have a demo later on this afternoon with them, and I wouldn't have otherwise known that they existed. So if you're watching and you're engaging, I think it can work for you.
Yes, agreed.
Mark, thank you for joining us today. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
hrmarketer.com. And as you mentioned earlier, our Twitter ID is @hrmarketer. Most of what we blog about is on topics related to what we spoke about today on our blogs at our website, hrmarketer.com. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, and I will link in the transcript to several articles that you guys have written on the ridiculous reality of influencer marketing. That's one of my favorites.
That's one of our more
Yeah,
popular
yeah.
ones.
So we'll link to them in the transcript. So if you go to bloggingforjobs.com, you'll be able to get all that information. I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us today at the Workology podcast, where we discuss the art and science of the workplace HR and recruitment. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill. Until next time, you can visit Blogging for Jobs to listen to all our previous podcast episodes.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller-Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.